Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 290 of Stand Up. A peak of a major winter blast beginning across the U.S. today, the day after Valentine's Day, President's Day. COVID cases and hospitalizations are continuing a massive drop since a January peak. And Donald Trump got away with it, kind of, again. Joining me today from the Center for American Progress to take a look at the who's who in the Biden administration, the always brilliant Rebecca Vallas. I'm Pete Dominic, a man in a shed. Time to stand up with me right now. Well, hello there, friend. I hope you had a pleasant weekend. If you're listening to this program on Monday, it's the 15th of February, smack dab right in the middle of the month. I hope that you had a good Valentine's Day, if that's a thing for you. For some people, you like it. Other people, it's forced upon you. And then yet others, it's sad because you miss someone or you're alone. So I never know quite how to talk about it, whether or not to talk about it at all. But we had a nice day with the kids. And we just did a lot of hanging around the house, had a nice dinner, and the girls have the whole week off because of President's Day, which is no different than other weeks because they don't even go to school anymore. I mean, these students in this year of academics are just all cheating. You know that, right? Like, they're just sharing each other's questions, putting the camera on their forehead so they can look down. It's just a mess. Whatever. It is what it is, and hopefully it will be, quote, over soon. I have a lot to talk with you about on today's show. This is Stand Up, a daily show where each and every day I talk about the most important issues that affect you, your family, your community, your country, your planet. Today, awesome guest, Rebecca Vallas from the Center for American Progress. We go through all kinds of personnel that she knows personally and has worked with that are now in the Biden administration and will be making a big difference in your actual lives or the lives of people you know or care about. Great conversation with Rebecca coming up, but I do want to wrap up what happened over the weekend and what I call the last 24. This is the first part of my daily news segment, and then we'll get to some rapid fire headlines with the news dump. But I watched all of the Sunday shows as I was out here planting basil in the shed this morning and cleaning up around the house. I had them in my headphones or coming through the speakers here in the shedio. And I got a bunch of clips, I think a bunch of good clips to play for you. I think I'll start with Velshi, which is such a good show. My friend Ali Velshi hosts every weekend from 8 to 10 a.m. I tape it and watch it in double speed, and I always learn so much. He has great guests. This whole month he's having, I think, almost exclusively black folks as his guests. It is Black History Month, of course, and Velshi this weekend hosted by Mehdi Hassan. And he had Dr. Brittany Cooper on. She's a brilliant professor at Rutgers University, a doctor, and I've interviewed her a couple of times before. And on Friday, after the president was acquitted, she tweeted, "As I've watched this impeachment, I just keep thinking of those sham lynching trials of old where white juries would almost never convict white men who were clearly guilty. Those jurists are political ancestors of the modern GOP. It's shameful, not to mention enraging." Also, to the liberal white people frustrated as the House managers presented an airtight case against a white supremacist insurrection to no avail, I say, welcome. This is what it feels like to scream into the wind. Black folks know it well. As you can see, it truly sucks. Well, here she is on Velshi talking about those tweets.
So we should remember that making a mockery of the justice system by refusing to convict or hold accountable white folks who commit violence is really an endemic feature of American democracy. It is, in fact, sort of ingrained as an expectation. So, for instance, in the state of Louisiana, where I'm from, a white man has never been sent to death row for killing a black man. Ever, even though my hometown of Shreveport, Louisiana, sends or in the recent past has sent more black men to death row than any other district per capita in the country. And so that's just one startling feature of the way that white men are not held accountable. So this was not a trial about the death penalty, but let's not forget that people died. In particular, police officers died because of the effects of or due to direct violence during these riots. And the president clearly incited these folks to come and riot. riot. And Mitch McConnell, concedes this very directly, and yet no one is being held accountable. The president was able to incite a violent mob that got police officers killed, that almost got his vice president assassinated, and nothing is going to happen to him at the level of government accountability. That bespeaks this older history of us going through the procedures and motions of having a trial when everyone knows at the end that the men who created and caused the violence will not be held accountable.
There she is, Dr. Brittany Cooper on Velshi. And I want to play one more clip. This is hard to hear. I hate to hear this because I know how true it is, but it's still difficult to hear, but it is a truth that I think is always worth sharing. And Brittany Cooper is great. I got to get her on the show. She's on Twitter at Professor Crunk. Here's more.
Yeah, look, I think the core thing that we have to remember here is that the modern day GOP has decided, like their forebears of old, that sanctioning violence forthrightly and unapologetically is key to the maintenance of a white power structure. Even Joe Biden has conceded very early when he came into the presidency just last month that this is about race, that this is about a sort of fear and anxiety and anger on the right at the fact that white supremacist power structures are slipping away, that they are in peril. The way that white supremacy has been protected in our country has been through lawless acts of violence that have been sanctioned by U.S. democratic processes. Republicans know that, and the thing that they are bidding for here is the right to be violent in public as a reinforcement of white supremacy. And what they are asking their 74 million voters to do, the 74 million voters who voted for Donald Trump, is to accede to this kind of democracy. This is not anomalous to the American project. This is how white people have maintained their power so long. It has never been about merit. When you watch the House managers make their case, what you saw was well put together, eloquent, deeply reasoned and thoughtful and emotionally compelling kinds of arguments, right? But that stuff is always suppressed by the brute force of white supremacy. That is why I made the connection between the racist lynching trials of old, because often black folks can be more compelling, more rigorous, and still be suppressed by white obsession to brute violent force.
Mehdi Hassan really trying to get in there. And also they played this great clip from the delegate Stacy Plaskett, who was one of the impeachment managers, who made a really important point that I wanted to share and underscore from the closing arguments.
I'll briefly say that defense counsels put a lot of videos out in their defense, playing clip after clip of black women talking about fighting for a cause or an issue or a policy. It was not lost on me as so many of them were people of color and women, and black women like myself, who are sick and tired of being sick and tired for our children.
All right, so there are the racial overtones, I think, of what we saw take place during the impeachment hearing, and of course, as a conclusion, I thought that was an important perspective to share. And now, my good friends, I want to move on to the reactions on Saturday night. What were you doing on Saturday night when the drama was playing out in Washington, D.C., in the Capitol, where there was these apparently feverish negotiations happening about calling witnesses? Well, Democrats wanted witnesses, they voted to get witnesses, and then they didn't actually have any witnesses, is how it was simplified and looked at by a lot of people who I like and trust on Twitter. My friend Sarah Kendzior tweeted, Democrats who wanted witnesses need to name names about who their party did not. Witnesses are necessary. The House managers know it and wanted them mere hours ago, and there's no reason not to have them. Ellie Mistal, my God, people, if will it convince Republicans was your standard for all of this, then why have this trial at all? Be fucking intellectually consistent, goddammit. If you thought there was any point to impeachment, then there was a point to call witnesses. Dr. Jason Johnson. Those who say witnesses wouldn't have made a difference are forgetting the purpose of this trial. It's to demonstrate Trump's continuing danger and thus lack of fitness to ever run for office again because he incited and attempted a coup. Why go cheap on the evidence? I can't believe this. The Democrats are an embarrassment. Ryan Lizza, Dem decision here was Biden agenda is more important than the Trump trial. Amanda Carpenter, do Democrats really believe Republicans will be more willing to push the Biden agenda because they dropped witnesses? Can they really believe this? Yeah, I don't really agree with many of those. And here's Claire McCaskill, former senator. I realize the optics, but remember, they just prevented Trump's lawyers from pretending that Trump was trying to stop violence. They just stipulated he was justifying the insurrection while the riot was going on. I think the tweet that I liked the most was from Norm Ornstein, who tweeted, "Why did Democrats take this action? McConnell made it clear that there would be no other Senate business during the trial. Weeks without Merrick Garland and other confirmations, no COVID relief bill. Dems could get no other material witnesses with courage to testify. No votes would change." So I am interested in your reaction. I hope it doesn't make you too jaded and cynical against Democrats, because we have a lot of important work that needs to get done in the next just under 2 years. And they're going to need our support and pressure to get it done with the razor-thin margins. But I understand your frustration. I understand your cynicism. But I hope you can keep your head above water and keep finding ways to support your congressmen, your senators, to try to get this agenda passed for our kids, for our future. I mean, I don't know. I saw a lot of cynicism out there. But let's go to Meet the Press, where Chuck Todd had Jamie Raskin on, and he was asking him some of the what ifs and asked him, why didn't he plan more for these witnesses? Here's the great Jamie Raskin.
Okay, well, let's start with Jamie Herrera-Beller. She issued her statement the day before. We tried mightily to get in touch with her. We just wanted her to, she could have come and just done an interview. We couldn't get through to her. And so we did seek permission to do it.
Why did you wait? I don't mean to interrupt you.
When we got a vote.
Can I interrupt you on this real quick?
Yeah. Please.
Her story was known for weeks. Why did you not try to contact her until the last couple of days?
No, she issued her statement the day before,
right.
And we brought up the resolution right at the time that the resolutions for witnesses were called for, according to the Senate resolution. There's no other time we could have done it. That was the moment to do it. We won that vote. We were going to proceed to do it, and then the Republicans stipulated to allow the evidence to come into the record. Now, you ask about some other people who might have gotten up there and lied. We don't know what Kevin McCarthy would have said. I mean, that was her record of what he was telling people. What he told people was that he had called Trump to say, you got to get us out of this. Hell, these people are here. Trump said, it's Antifa. McCarthy said, no, it's not Antifa, Mr. President. It's your people. You got to get us out of here. To which Trump said something like, well, maybe they just care more about the election than you do, i.e., Trump knew exactly what they were doing. He knew that that mob, which he had deployed, was there, occupying people's offices and threatening Congress. So it was there for everybody to see.
Right.
So we could have had 1,000 witnesses, but that could not have overcome the kinds of silly arguments that people like McConnell and Capito are hanging their hats on. They're trying to have it both ways. But
And then Chuck Todd asked him one more question, and it was a long answer. I don't want to play it all, but Jamie Raskin finished with a devastating criticism of Trump's defense and all of those who supported him. And I absolutely was there for it. Really funny and brutal.
And they did not honestly confront the reality of what happened to America, which was Donald Trump incited a violent mob to attack the Congress of the United States. So you know what? We have no regrets at all. We left it totally out there on the floor of the U.S. Senate, and every senator knew exactly what happened. And just go back and listen to McConnell's speech. Everybody was convinced of the case we put forward. But, as the defense lawyer said, just pick any one of these phony constitutional defenses, and then you can justify it. It could be First Amendment. It could be Bill of Attainder. It could be due process. All of them are nonsense. I thought that I successfully demolished them at the trial. But there's no reasoning with people who basically are acting like members of a religious cult, and when they leave office should be selling flowers at Dulles Airport.
Congressman Jamie Raskin, I hope it brings you some solace.
Jamie Raskin is the boss. Great work from him and all the rest of the impeachment managers. I was just on pins and needles the whole time, too, because Senator Patrick Leahy is very old and just had a scare, was in a hospital, and he was presiding over the Senate impeachment trial. And I mean, I just had my breath held until I heard him interrupt from time to time to sound like this. Here he is reading the final vote tally. Every time I heard him, I was just so relieved.
The yeas are 57. The nays are 43.
Thank God. Pat Leahy, Senator Leahy, still alive. Man, does that guy sound really old every time he talked, and seemed very old. You shouldn't be that old and be in government. I'm sorry. I've said it before. It's not the most popular opinion, but I stand by it. Okay, so here is just a couple quick audio pieces from Senator Susan Collins of Maine, who voted to impeach the president, and then you'll hear Senator Bill Cassidy with a very succinct statement about why he voted to impeach Donald Trump.
His actions to interfere with the peaceful transition of power, the hallmark of our Constitution and our American democracy, were an abuse of power.
I voted to convict President Trump because he is guilty.
And for that correct vote, Senator Bill Cassidy was immediately censured by Louisiana Republicans. The state GOP took the remarkable step of censoring the Baton Rouge, Louisiana Republican hours after his vote to convict. I mean, this guy voted during his first 6-year term that began 2014 with Donald Trump 89% of the time. A lot of people were pointing out that same Republican Party of Louisiana didn't censure former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, David Duke. So it's worse to vote to impeach Trump than to be in the Klan, is what people are trying to draw the connection to. But that was a long time ago, right? Sure. This is a different Republican Party of Louisiana. And what I mean by that is that they don't wear hoods anymore. They just go out and openly admit they are white supremacists, it would seem. All right, let's go to this past Friday night when on Real Time with Bill Maher, former Republican, who's now registered Democrat, Steve Schmidt, who's got some controversy surrounding his role at the Lincoln Project, but that's not about this. He talked about what happened between Election Day and January 6th. And I thought he's always pretty powerful and extremely well-spoken. Say what you will about him, his flaws and what he's been involved with. But, man, he often says the right thing. And in this moment, I think that's one of those examples. I mean, 3 minutes, a solid, deadly analysis from Steve Schmidt on HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher.
These months that took place between Election Day and Inauguration Day are some of the most significant months in this nation's history. What happened between Election Day and the 6th is faith and belief in American democracy was poisoned, premeditatedly and deliberately by the president, by the cynical elites like Josh Hawley and Cruz, the paid liars like Sean Hannity and Laura Ingraham. They poisoned it. And day by day, like an Exxon Valdez, like a BP Deepwater Horizon, the numbers rose. Till 82% of Republicans said the fairest and freest election in American history was stolen. We've invented a lot of great things in this country. Airplanes, iPhones, ships that can land on the moon and return, penicillin, I say that for Trump. All of these things. The greatest thing we've ever invented in this country, bar none, is the peaceful transition of power. That was uninterrupted from 1797 until 2021.
And separation of powers.
And that ended. This process was blood-soaked in the United States of America because of the incitement to violence and insurrection of Donald Trump. And the reality is that the more clear it was, the more certain the outcome of that trial was, the greater the necessity, the greater the moral necessity for it taking place. Because what will be carved for the ages into the granite of the story of America are the men and women who betrayed their oaths, betrayed their juror oaths, betrayed their country, and allowing a president who sought to be a dictator walk out. And make no mistake, Donald Trump runs the Republican Party. That party is an autocratic party. I love Congressman Kitzinger's courage in standing up. A requirement to be in Congress ought to be the willingness Democrat or Republican, to lay down your seat on a matter of principle, but he is in the minority. The autocrats in that caucus are in the majority. And anytime you have a coalition of convenience between conservatives and fascists, it is always the fascists who win. And the first thing they do when they win is dispatch the naive conservatives who in coalition help bring them to power. And the idea that in 2020 you vote for Donald Trump after he has the blood of hundreds of thousands of Americans on his hands from his lying, his poisoning of our democracy, it is inexplicable.
Steve Schmidt. Wow. Powerful stuff, huh? All right, a couple more here. Let's listen to Rahm Emanuel. He is a contributor over on ABC. He was on This Week, and I think this analysis of what's next for Donald Trump is perfect. This is exactly, I totally agree with this from Rahm Emanuel. He's talking to the two other Republicans on the panel, Chris Christie, and I forget who the other woman was.
He won't run, but he is going to spend the next 2 years on retribution. He is going after every Republican that either said something bad or voted against him. And God bless him. You guys didn't want to cut him off. You made a Faustian bargain with them, and that's what's coming to the Republican Party. And one thing I would say, I figured out my Hanukkah gift for every Republican senator, JFK's book, Profiles in Courage, because they need that book. And they need to read it.
All right, there you go. That is the weekend roundup, audio roundup for you, the last 24. And when you hear that song now, apparently it means it's time.
So you're tired of COVID, want to hear about the mumps? Well, perk up, get ready for today's news dump.
The mumps. I don't have any stories on the mumps, Dan McDonald. Another great jingle from him. Send them my way. standupwithpete@gmail.com. I do have stories on dragonflies. How about this? Dragonflies can do mid-air backflips even while unconscious, and scientists are saying the new research on the insects may help improve drone technology. Yeah, apparently dragonflies, according to this story from Inside Science, perform upside-down backflips to right themselves even when unconscious, a discovery that apparently is going to help robots, according to this new study. Dragonflies, they say, are the acrobats of the sky. As adults, they catch prey in midair, approaching it from below and then flipping upside down to wrap their legs around their victims. This maneuver led researchers to investigate how these insects are righting themselves when they drop upside down, since most research on aerial righting has focused on flightless animals such as cats. Oh, it's a fascinating story. Read it at Inside Science. Let's go to Egypt, shall we, where archaeologists have discovered an ancient beer factory. That's right, archaeologists have discovered a massive 5,000-year-old brewery in the ancient Egyptian city of Abydos, according to Egypt's Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities. The brewery is located in Egypt's Sohag Governorate and likely dates back to the reign of King Narmer. And apparently, they use the same recipe as America's great beer, Rolling Rock. Huh. And it's the oldest brewery found in Egypt. I was joking about the Rolling Rock thing. Sorry to the Egyptian beer lovers. An earthquake has hit Japan. Oh, no, off the coast of Fukushima. No, injuring hundreds. A magnitude 7.3 earthquake struck eastern Japan late Saturday night with an epicenter off the coast of Fukushima, not far from where a previous quake and tsunami occurred in 2011, causing the meltdown of 3 nuclear reactors and bumping me from my gig on CNN's John King, because they had to report on that every night. And that's the most important outcome of the 2011 meltdown, of course. Those reactors was me. There appears to be no major damage this time, though. Japanese Prime Minister said no deaths have been reported as of Sunday morning. Oh, here's a fun story. An 8-year-old border collie named Lulu has inherited $5 million. This is from Nashville, Tennessee. And Lulu is apparently loved by her human so much that when he died, his last will, they made Lulu a very wealthy dog. I don't understand how this is a possible thing. Guy was 84 years old, he was unmarried, successful businessman, passed away, and his will named his dog, left the dog the money enough to pay for as much food as any dog could possibly imagine. The will reads, $5 million will be transferred to a trust to be formed upon my death with the care of my border collie. I got problems with that. I don't think you should leave money to a dog. I guess I don't even know how that's legally possible. The NHL has announced the first month of the NHL season has been pretty bumpy. 8 teams placed on pause, 35 games postponed, 120 players landed on the COVID-19 list since January 30th, and now the NHL is adapting a new approach through the first month of the season. They're adding rapid tests, and I don't know what they're doing, but apparently the headline at ABC News is NHL adapting COVID-19 approach. Sorry, I don't have the details on that one. I got to move on. But speaking of COVID-19, this is a little bit more good news. The UK government said Sunday that it reached its goal of giving at least one COVID-19 vaccine shot to the most vulnerable people in the country, increasing pressure on ministers to clarify when they will ease a lockdown imposed in early January. But everyone over 75 in the UK has had at least one shot. The coronavirus vaccination effort has reached 22% of the population. Meanwhile, here in America, we're up to 13 million Americans vaccinated. Still a long way to go. Don't usually do COVID headlines in the news dump, but I squeezed those in there. And that is today's news dump. And now on to my first and only guest of the show today. I was going to have a couple guests as I normally do, but I went long with Rebecca Vallas, and I'm happy that I did because she's one of the smartest people I've ever met in my life, and she's one of the best as well. Morally, she is one of the most thoughtful, generous, brilliant people, and she's been fighting poverty for her whole career. She is a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress. She helped build their Poverty to Prosperity program. She is an anti-poverty hero, is what I call her. She co-founded the National Clean Slate Initiative to support state efforts to adopt clean slate policies for folks who are affected by incarceration. She's a legal aid lawyer at heart, and she spent several years representing low-income individuals in Philadelphia. And you've seen her on MSNBC, CNN, C-SPAN, CNBC, Fox News, and all of the rest. She hosts her own podcast, which I helped her get started years back. It's called Off Kilter, formerly Talk Poverty Radio. She's on Twitter at Rebecca Vallas, and we had a great conversation about personnel in the Biden administration. Maybe some of you don't think this is that interesting. I think it's super interesting and important, and nobody better to talk about it than Rebecca Vallas. Here is our conversation with my good friend, who we made small talk for a while, but I just jumped right into our policy talk. I wanted to have you on because you're a policy expert on so many issues, and economic issues, poverty, disability, legal aid, clean slate initiative, but you know so many of the players who are now working in this Biden administration, and you know what qualifies them and what the issues that they're working on. And I thought that would be a very interesting conversation to hear about that, because very few people know as many of these people and as much about the issues as you do. So I wanted to start, because you're at the Center for American Progress and have been for a long time, with Neera Tanden, who some people are just learning about, other people have been familiar with her. There's a lot to say, but who is she? What is her job, and what do you think about it?
Well, before we get into any specific names of folks, and I actually am really excited that you wanted to have this conversation, because there is a lot of focus right now on policy, and there should be, but in a lot of ways, personnel is policy, and the choices that the Biden team, the Biden-Harris team are making on who to put in really important roles, some of which are cabinet level, and a lot of which are actually lower than cabinet level, but really important. A lot of those choices that they're making really signal the direction that the administration is seeking to take the policy agenda in this country. And a lot of the folks who are now being tapped for really critical positions in a lot of really important agencies that have to do with economic policy, inequality, poverty, are people who have been spending their careers fighting as some of the most fervent and smartest advocates for the kinds of policies that we need to see. So it's a new day, not just in Washington, but in this country for a lot of reasons.
Very important point that personnel is policy. And if you don't believe that, think about Scott Pruitt, a former coal lobbyist at EPA, destroying that. Betsy DeVos at Department of Education, and obviously Stephen Miller dealing with pretty much everything, especially immigration. I mean, what does that signal when you hear those names and got to know who they were and what they did, which leads us back to the personnel and people that we're talking about with you today in the Biden administration?
And a lot of the folks you're naming, right, like some of the people whose names got to be the best known during the past 4 years, like Stephen Miller, were people who were very close to the policy that was being churned out. A lot of the people that you just named and others that are kind of their ilk were actually people who were kind of Trump cronies who were put in jobs that they were just totally unqualified for, and which brought an immense amount of incompetence to the federal government on top of the layer of cruelty is the point through everything that they were doing for 4 years. So I think it's not just a new day in terms of, new folks coming in with a totally new perspective on who they're working for in this country, but it's also a real moment to get to say, like, wake up and smell the competence. And that is how I am feeling right now every time I see more and more of the names coming out of people who are being put in really important positions, both ones that are subject to, in some cases, like Neera Tanden, my former boss, subject to Senate confirmations, many of which are not subject to confirmation. And so folks are already in those roles. Neera is definitely a great place to start. Neera Tanden, for anyone who is not familiar with her, although anyone on Twitter probably is familiar with Neera, is she, until recently, has been the head of the Center for American Progress and the Center for American Progress Action Fund. That's where I've worked for quite some time in a bunch of different roles, although right now I'm a senior fellow. And Neera had her confirmation hearing for the nomination that she was given by the Biden team. That is to be the head of the Office of Management and Budget, OMB. Right. Now, that might sound really nerdy and wonky. People are like, okay, wow, we're already into acronyms and we're only a few moments into this conversation. Well, OMB is a really important agency because it's the epicenter of the federal government when it comes to the budget. And budgets, of course, are moral documents. Budgets are policy documents. The budget, that is really where the choices are getting made about what to resource and what to cut and how much is going to, for example, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, right, formerly called food stamps, and how much are we doing in defense spending, right? All decisions that are kind of interlinked. So now Neera is someone who is perhaps one of the more visible and well-known nominees from the Biden sort of list, in part, as I said, because of Twitter. She does not hide her thoughts and her feelings, and often is very kind of quick-witted and sharp-witted, and so has gotten, I think, a lot of I would say flack about her tweets. And I just want to say, as someone who knows her, as someone who's worked for her, but also as someone who finds it incredibly significant that she's a person who is not just going to be the first woman of color, once confirmed, to lead this agency. She's going to be the first person who grew up helped by the very programs that OMB administers, like SNAP, like housing assistance, like free and reduced price school lunch. It's get over her tweets, people, is kind of what I want to say. Like, this is not just an eminently qualified person to run this agency, but it's incredibly powerful and valuable for it to be a person in that job who has personal lived experience of benefiting from the programs that it administers, rather than just thinking about them as numbers on a page.
I just want to stop there to just get more specific on OMB and one question, about, I think it's always important to say a budget is a moral document. If you have a limited amount of money, how are you going to spend it? On what? For people in your business, in your home, and in your community, and obviously we're talking about in your country. And my first question is, how much control or influence the office itself and Neera Tanden will have, or anybody would have, versus what Congress does with passing, obviously, a budget? And then within that question also, you mentioned this. OMB is so important. It doesn't sound very sexy. Defense sounds sexy. CIA sounds sexy when you're talking about the federal government. But OMB arguably has more of an actual impact on your life, all of us, directly every day, than many of these other, quote, sexier or more high profile national agencies, right?
I mean, absolutely. And, everything you said is right. And I want to be clear, it's not like this is just a power center within the federal government that makes all decisions about the budget by itself. It's not, right? It goes hand in hand and works in tandem with Congress, with the White House, with other critical committees, for example, in the House and Senate that have a lot of say. One that I'll name is the Senate Budget Committee, which is now headed by Bernie Sanders, none other than Bernie Sanders. So there's going to be a number of folks kind of stepping into new positions that are of real import in the budget space that are not just Biden nominees. But everything you said is right about how much you really can't understate the significance of this position, of the entire agency that is OMB. And I'll give a few examples, right? She's got an amazing team shaping up over there. It's a huge agency, lots of folks who are also careers, right? So people who have been there, not as political appointees, but as career employees, folks who were there, many of which who stayed during the Trump admin. I've got some friends in that case, and I want to give them a huge shout out for trying to hold the place together, which was no small feat and challenging.
Do they, off the record, tell you crazy stories that you can never really talk about? Can any of them ever write a book? Because that would be a really fascinating story to hear the narrative from people who are those type of people holding the ground, if you will, not political appointees, career people.
I mean, there are several that I can think of who I would love to see write a book, and definitely have shared some stories that I've heard, a couple of which are coming to mind, but none of which I am authorized to share, and all of which still implicate, I think, people who really were trying to hold the ship together. So maybe a subject for a later date, but I do want to give a shout out to those career folks who have stayed, who survived, and who were fighting to protect programs like Medicaid that the Trump administration was trying to dismantle in every way they could administratively, really from the inside. And those folks who never will get the Medal of Honor, right, or never will get the front page news story. Many of them are really kind of quietly heroes inside of agencies where they stayed, and that is really worth saying. But NERA's got an amazing team shaping up over at OMB, including several folks who I count as friends and close colleagues over the years that I'll name, because they're going to be people who are really in significant positions to help to shape not just the budget decisions that get made in, say, the president's budget proposal, which is an important document for shaping policy, even though it doesn't become law as itself. And many of whom are going to be in important positions to also withstand some of the garbage that we're already hearing from Republicans around, oh my God, all these deficits, because they seem to have forgotten that they created the deficits with their tax cuts for the wealthy and corporations. So, hugely excited to see one of NERA's most senior advisors be a friend named Michael Linden. Most recently, he led the Groundwork Collaborative, an economic policy convener. He also led economic policy at the Center for American Progress a number of years ago, and he worked for Senator Patty Murray on the Senate Help Committee, Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. He's going to be a really important engine over there to help protect against, I think, some of the austerity narrative that we know Republicans are trying to use to prevent decisions that we know we need to make as a society about making sure that we're providing relief to people who are struggling. And then I also want to say probably my favorite nerd anywhere in the federal government has showed up over at OMB. His name is Bobby Kogan. He was the former chief mathematician for the Senate Budget Committee under Bernie Sanders. And he's going to be one of the folks over there helping to really make the case for why, yes, we can afford to increase nutrition assistance and increase housing support and other things if we just make different budget choices. I would be remiss if I didn't also name another Center for American Progress colleague who was just named to a critical position over at OMB as well, and that is Topher Spiro, who folks on Twitter also, I am sure, are familiar with, because if you care about health policy, you're following Topher on Twitter. He now gets to take his ideas on how to undo the damage from the Trump era, and to strengthen the ACA, how to move towards universal health care and reverse Trump's damage to Medicaid, most importantly, off of Twitter and into policy. And that's going to be really fun to see as well.
What about, you mentioned Bernie Sanders, of course, he is now the chairman of the Senate Budget Committee. And so, we saw NERA attend, and being confirmed by that Senate committee yesterday, right? The last couple of days. And so what does it mean to have a staunch leader in the progressive movement like Senator Bernie Sanders? What does Bernie Sanders being the chairman of that committee mean?
It's a huge, huge deal, to be like super frank. I think that's the technical term. Huge deal. Bernie Sanders, Senator Sanders, he's not going to have, again, sole control over budget decisions, right? That's not how these committees work. There's actually shared jurisdiction over a lot of what gets done in Congress between committees, and another really important Senate committee that often works hand in hand with the budget committee in that chamber is the Senate Finance Committee, which is now headed by Chair Ron Wyden from Oregon. Also very exciting to see the gavels, right, change hands as now that the power sharing agreement is in place in Congress. And so we've got Dems holding gavels in ways that are also a really big deal here, right? For that means they can hold hearings. That means they can put out reports. That means they can really use their posts to shine a light, and also to use investigatory authority in certain cases. And
that very short list that you just made is all attributed, maybe you wouldn't agree with all, but I feel like it's all attributed to Georgia Democrats. Like all of these chairmanships, all of these gavels going to Democrats in the Senate is 100% because of that runoff election. Maybe you're going to push back on 100%, but I think it's really significant to point that out.
It's obviously Georgia is what pushed us over the edge. We wouldn't be having this conversation if we didn't have at least a 50-50 Senate. As someone who grew up in Atlanta, I have to say I've got a lot of love for Georgia voters for a lot of reasons. But I think your point is a really good one, which is that I think Democrats really do seem to be behaving like they understand that who put them in office, right, and why they're in power. And it wasn't some cruise in foregone conclusion. This was a hard fought election that was really in a lot of ways delivered by state and local organizers who for decades have been building the infrastructure and doing that kind of shoe leather, get out the vote and organizing work that all of a sudden shows up in turning a place like Georgia blue, but certainly is not something that started with this election cycle and is to be celebrated for the potential, additional states that also come onto the table like Texas and others as Dems start to think a little bit more broadly about what the coalition looks like.
Yeah. That'll be that's a good point about Texas. Let me get back to our conversation about personnel that Rebecca Vallas knows and can talk about. Who is Angela Hanks?
Oh, so really excited about some of the names that are showing up over at the Department of Labor. Obviously, the Department of Labor has a lot to do with worker policy, worker protections, labor policy, right? So some of the names that have shown up over there in really critical appointments include Angela Hanks, someone I count as a friend and a former Center for American Progress colleague. She's a senior counselor now to the Secretary of Labor, Secretary Marty Walsh, formerly of Boston mayor.
I interviewed Marty Walsh several times. We got along great, but I don't know enough about him. I mean, mayor of Boston, we could talk about his record there, but what do you think about him?
Well, I want to start with Angela, and I want to name one other name. And really exciting, I think, the women who are kind of the engine behind his team.
No, let's get to the men. Let's just forget it. Let's just get right to the top guy.
I mean, I'm not even going to say anything other than it's predictable.
All right, Angela Hanks.
Just kidding. So Angela Hanks, senior counselor to the Secretary of Labor, one of the smartest people I know when it comes to worker policy and really to kind of turning the conversation on its head so that we're not just all continuing to repeat neoliberal talking points about we need growth and, the stock market, and instead, trying to think about how do we put workers first? How do we think about, power in this country and what does that mean about labor policy? So really exciting to see someone like Angela showing up in that role. The other really exciting appointment at the Department of Labor is Janelle Jones, who is the chief chief economist now to the Department of Labor. She comes from the Economic Policy Institute and most immediately from the Groundwork Collaborative, where Angela also worked. And these are two really strong, progressive Black women running the show over at the Department of Labor and working to center Black women in really setting the policy agenda over at the Department of Labor. And it's important, it's overdue, but it's also incredibly important in this moment because Black women have been among the hardest hit workers in the pandemic and in the recession, which some people call the she-cession, which has, of course, compounded pre-existing discrimination and disadvantage that were already at just really crisis levels. So really incredible to see these appointments. And I think they're going to shape what a lot of that white guy that we can come back to, Marty Walsh, is going to be doing and saying as we start to have, hopefully, a conversation in this country that doesn't just sound dramatically different from what we saw under Trump, which was like, how can we roll back rules like overtime increases and other critical things for workers, but that start to bring, racial equity to bear in a comprehensive way, and that start to bring worker power to bear in a way that connects the conversation that's happening among, say, the Fight for 15 movement with what's happening in the ivory tower shaping policy.
Such good points. But we can actually seriously forget about Marty Walsh because everybody's going to cover him and have a take on him. But we're talking now with you about some of these lesser known but really influential and important personnel because they affect policy and you actually do know them. So who's next? Can we go to the Department of Agriculture?
Let's go first to the Council of Economic Advisors because we've been talking.
Let's go over to the Council of Economic Advisors then, folks.
We're talking a lot about economic policy and one of the bodies within the White House that is most important, most central in shaping not just economic policy, but really kind of, putting the numbers to work in helping to both make the case for policy and, kick the tires on policies before we're actually rolling them out is the Council of Economic Advisors. So it's economists, as its name suggests, and it's a crew of folks. I could, name several of them as all really, really good and important picks, but I'm going to name one in particular as someone that I'm really excited, who's a bud of mine, who actually used to come on my podcast all the time until he got named by Biden and couldn't do it anymore. And his name is Jared Bernstein. He is President Biden's former chief economist back when Joe Biden was vice president. So he's not new to the Biden crew, but he was a longtime economist at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, an organization I do a lot of work with that you, I think, have had on your show before. And the reason I'm so excited to see him and some of his colleagues in the jobs that they're in over at the CEA, the Council of Economic Advisors, is because we're heading into a period where, we learned these lessons from the Great Recession, right? Where we've got all of this support among the American people, 80% some support for the size of the kind of economic relief that we've seen President Biden propose and that Congress is currently debating. $1.9 trillion is the amount of just this package, right, with more that needs to come to provide much needed pandemic relief to folks who are struggling, and as well as state and local aid and automatic stabilizers to make sure that programs like jobless benefits aren't running out on artificial dates, but rather are responding to economic conditions, direct checks. There's so much in what Biden has proposed and what Congress is now debating. At the same time, what we're seeing, particularly from conservatives, particularly from Republicans, but also from, some of those kind of economists who need to learn to take a seat and maybe let folks who are a little more in touch with reality run the show these days, like Larry Summers, who really deserves a shout out because of an incredibly boneheaded op-ed that got a lot of attention a few weeks ago in the Washington Post. You got all these kind of conservative folks saying, oh my God, we can't spend this much money. This is too much money. Look at this price tag. And it's this austerity, kind of bullshit, frankly. And we learned those lessons during the Great Recession. We know what happens if we tie our own hands, and if our federal response fiscally is inadequate to pull us out of the hole that we're in economically. We know that we will pay for it, literally for a long time, in human costs and in slow recovery. And so when you see someone like Jared Bernstein in this role over at the CEA, and then, doing the press conferences, in front of the White House press corps, talking about how the austerity talking points are bullshit, and coming out and saying, here's why this is the scale of relief that we need. We have an advocate in that role, and we have an advocate who's really fighting for the American people. So I'm really excited to see Jared as someone with a heck of a backbone, and who is very smart on how to fight against this austerity stuff in that role.
That's great to hear. I didn't know that you were so close with him and knew him so well. I've always respected him. He used to come on the show, and I've always thought a lot of him, and I know he's been with Joe Biden for a long time, so obviously he's got his trust. But the way that you describe it as an insider to his character and his knowledge, I think is great. So we go now to agriculture? Yes.
Well, let's go to ag. Department of Agriculture, a really, really huge department that does a lot more things than just provide food assistance. Obviously, there's a ton in there that's about farmers and farm subsidies and other stuff I'm not going to talk about. But the names that I'm really excited about over at the Department of Agriculture are some of the sub-cabinet folks who are going to be making really important decisions and really leading the way when it comes to food and nutrition policy. And it's long overdue, and it couldn't come at a better time, given that we were at a hunger crisis before the pandemic, and the pandemic has thrown fuel all over it, and steroids and all the metaphors you want to draw. Like, we are at a point where people are running out of food, like in communities across the country, at rates that should be alarming to everyone, and which are not being felt evenly, of course, given the dramatic inequality of how this pandemic and the recession are impacting people. So it's not getting talked about enough, with a lot of folks who are, comfortably able to work from home going, who's food insecure? I'm able to get my food delivered from Wegmans, right? Like there's another side of this conversation, which is a lot of folks were already having trouble stretching food assistance through the SNAP program, which used to be called food stamps, all the way through the month, because those benefits are just so incredibly low, like cruelly low. So Stacy Dean, who is now leading food and nutrition policy over at the Department of Agriculture, she comes from the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, which I named before, where she was their vice president for food policy. And she is a deep, deep supporter and advocate of SNAP and of strengthening SNAP and expanding SNAP. And so now, is the lead person inside of the Biden administration, outlining the steps that the administration is already starting to take to strengthen that program. And one of those really exciting announcements that we actually saw just a couple of weeks ago, I was pinching myself, right? Because I got to rewire my brain. I still hear executive order and I go, oh my God, terrible things are coming. And now I have to remember, no, actually, these are good words when paired now. These can be good things for people. One of the executive orders that came out from the Biden administration a couple of weeks ago from her team was, or actually goes to her team as the recipient, was about expanding SNAP benefits and doing it by reassessing the really outdated, like decades outdated way that benefits are even calculated. It's rooted in 1960s math and doesn't bear any resemblance today to what the cost of a basic but adequate and nutritious diet is. And that thing is called the Thrifty Food Plan. Biden has said, let's reassess this. We've got to make sure that people can afford to eat in this country, and just such an important step. So really excited to see Stacy.
What a poorly named programs.
Well, they're all poorly named programs for the most part. And that's a conversation for another episode, Pete. We should do that.
Who's I think we have one more person that we want to discuss.
We do. And actually, if we're at ag, I should give one other quick shout out and just say Benga Ajalore, another former colleague at the Center for American Progress who led a lot of the rural policy at CAP, also just went over to ag. I'm not entirely sure exactly what his job is going to look like, but I know he's going to bring his rural policy experience, which is so important and much needed as the administration starts to think about the communities that are that have always been hardest hit and many of which are really underserved by food assistance. So really excited to see Benga there too. The last person that I was going to name, and this is where you were about to go, takes us to the Social Security Administration. And Pete, I had like a little bit of a flashback when I was pulling together this list of people because I remembered that the first time that you ever had me on your show back when you were over at Sirius, which is, I guess, was years and years and years ago. We were both children, clearly, was about the attacks that were going on Social Security disability benefits.
That's right. I mean, which is what, that's the heart of your life, being a legal aid lawyer. You've understood this forever and been fighting for it forever. And so I don't remember when that was. I mean, I must have been like 35, and that would put you at like 12. I mean, you've been fighting this issue for a long time. So where are we at now? I mean, that's for an hour to just talk about the history of that fight. Where are we at now? And who are you going to tell me about? It's going to make a difference.
I was flashing back, thinking about, meeting you, having you be, I think, the first radio show actually that was highlighting some of the terrible attacks that were happening on disability benefits back in what feels like a different lifetime, but which was it was actually during the Obama years, and it was some Republicans in Congress who were targeting those programs. But I say that only by way of saying that I saved not the best for last, but one of the best for last, and one of the ones that's closest to my heart, and that's the top policy job at the Social Security Administration. It's the Deputy Commissioner for Retirement and Disability Policy at SSA. A really, really, really big job, obviously, because of how much the Social Security Administration covers. There's retirement benefits, there's disability benefits, and there's a whole bunch of policy that goes into both of those. And the person who has now been put in that position is a friend, a colleague, someone I actually serve on a couple of boards with. Her name is Kololo Kijakazi, and she comes from most immediately the Urban Institute, where she's been a senior fellow, but she's also been at several other really fantastic organizations, again, like the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities and a few others over the years. The reason I'm so excited about seeing her in this role is because she is a beneficiary advocate. She is a person who sees her job as fighting for, not against, people who receive Social Security benefits. And the person that she has now replaced is someone that I often call the Stephen Miller of Social Security policy, because he could not have been the more of the opposite. His name is Mark Warshawski. I was about to say his name was Mark Warshawski, but I have no reason to believe that it is not still, and that he is not still in this world. I should say he should never work again in policy, because he should go down as the Stephen Miller of Social Security policy, Mark Warshawski. He authored multiple rules to slash disability benefits administratively, some of which were stopped, some of which are kind of needing to be stopped, some of which didn't get all that far along because of the disability community doing real battle with him pretty much the entire 4 years he was in that job. But it is such a big deal to have a beneficiary advocate in that job instead of someone who's quietly working to tear benefits away from people who desperately need them. So I am so excited for Kololo to be in that role and to be working to undo the damage from Trump, but also to be outlining a disability agenda as part of the Social Security expansion agenda that centers programs like the Supplemental Security Income Program, SSI, and Social Security Disability Insurance, which so often gets sort of stepchilded compared to Social Security retirement benefits, but which are two of the programs most in need of expansion right now.
These programs, I just want to talk with you. I want to go off on so many tangents as you're talking about. I'm trying to stay on course with what the aim of this conversation has been. But we do have to, I would love to talk with you about how these programs work and who uses them and depends upon them and the history of them, because they're all so important, but they're so demonized and demagogued and just misunderstood. I mean, you hear about these programs and some people that have been on them or dependent on them, and you make these judgments. And at some point, we really should, well, we've talked about it before, but we really should talk about it again. I know you got to go. Do you have time to just talk about the minimum wage, what's going on with this potential $15 minimum wage in the relief or rescue package? I don't know which word you want to use.
We totally should. And I always love doing your show. I always love pitching people for your show. And the thing I will say that I know you have done in the past, but which I think would be really, really cool for you to do for a future episode sometime soon, would be, instead of having me on to talk more about how these programs work, have on a couple of people who are currently being helped or have been helped by these programs to share their experiences, because a lot of the folks out there who are coming up with really good ideas for what policymakers should be hearing and need to know right now are the people who have direct lived experience. And I know that's something you've done a lot on your show.
Great idea. And if anybody listening knows anybody or has been on any of these programs, benefited from them, by all means, contact me, standupwithpete@gmail.com. You got to go?
No, I've got a couple more minutes because I think we really do have to hit on the minimum wage. We would be remiss if we didn't do that. So you'd have to be living under a rock right now. And you know what? Hey, props to anyone who's found large enough rocks to live under, if that's what your thing is, right? Hey, I'm not going to judge. But if you are not living under a rock and you're consuming any level of news about what's been happening in Washington, you are aware that it's not just the impeachment proceedings that have been going on. There also has been a serious effort by Democrats to advance the economic relief package that you referenced before, that I was talking a little bit about, that $1.9 trillion that President Biden has proposed in much needed economic relief. Some of it's the direct checks, like I mentioned, the $1,400. Some of it's really important unemployment insurance extensions. There's a component of it that's really, really important that doesn't get nearly enough attention, which is about state and local aid, so that we don't see long-term trickle-down effects that we're dealing with for, God knows how long, of states actually effectively, going, states, Mitch McConnell told states, hey, go bankrupt, right? What really needs to happen is states have to balance their budgets. And so they end up having to cut, workers and programs and all kinds of stuff to deal with inadequate resources. So that part we don't have a ton of time to talk about, but so important. And there's so much more else in that package. And yet what we're seeing, as we were talking about before, is no Republican support. Just no Republican support for the scale of relief that we need, despite the fact that 40% of Americans think that Biden's package is about the right size, and another 40% worry it's too freaking small, and they're not wrong to worry about that.
I feel like when you say no Republican support, I just want to be clear, in Congress, no Republican votes for it, but I saw, and I'm not sure what the polling question was asked was, but that like 70% of Republicans, self-identified Republican Americans, supported, I don't know if it was some relief or this relief, but if that's the case, you can convince those folks. And it's not that hard. It's like, you're going to get a check. And it's not because you're not working. It's because you can't work, because your work is closed. You're going to get a check. Most people support that. But I think what you're saying is Republicans in Congress who will be voting on it don't. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly right. And it's the distinction to make, right? Because this is Republicans in Congress, and in particular Republicans in the Senate, that's where this matters the most, who are saying, we don't care what our voters want. We don't care what our voters are actually pleading for. It's not like this economic recession and pandemic is only impacting Democratic voters, right? Republican voters are supporting this too. And yet Republicans in Congress, because their real constituency isn't voters, right? It's wealthy donors, it's wealthy corporations. It's a different kind of political accountability, right, than what we see with the Democratic Party. Instead, what they are seeking to do is to obstruct and shrink and minimize the amount of relief that can go through. So that's the context for this ongoing debate around how much relief should we authorize, and lower down at the level of detail within that debate is like which of the policies and how much should the checks be, et cetera. One of the things I'm really, really excited about seeing in that package, among many, many other exciting policies, is a proposal that would effectively turn the child tax credit into a monthly child allowance for families, which is a huge deal if you want to talk about poverty and strategies for reducing particularly child poverty. Some of the analysis I've seen tells us estimates that that particular proposal alone would actually reduce child poverty by a third if we could actually see it enacted. So there's really big stuff in this package.
I've always felt like that was a Republican idea, the earned income tax credit for children. And then I feel like now Mitt Romney is actually leading the charge on evolving it into how you just described it.
It's been a bipartisan idea, the child tax credit, for a long time, and it's had bipartisan support. We've seen proposals, and I've been one of the people, in my past life as a poverty researcher, helping to come up with proposals for how to expand the child tax credit, how to make it function more like a child allowance, something we see in other countries like Canada, where they've had real success with choosing not to have child poverty, a choice a country can make, right, when it has the resources we have. And we have now seen folks like Mitt Romney, who I will always, every time I think of Mitt Romney, think of him saying that the trees were the right height. But, I digress. We'll set that aside. It's just that'll always stick in my head.
I always think of who let the dogs out. But go ahead.
God, there's so many things with Mitt Romney. But Mitt Romney has been, senator from Utah, one of the conservative voices lending his support to the idea of dramatically increasing the child tax credit and making it look more like a child allowance. Some of the ideas he has put forth about how to pay for it are really non-starters, like cutting other programs that help poor families. That should not be how we pay for improvements to programs. We should be raising taxes on rich people who can afford to pay more in taxes. And that's something I think that is really important just to say. But it is extremely exciting to see this level of now bipartisan momentum around this idea. So really big stuff that's part of this relief package. We're just scratching the surface. And I know we wanted to talk about the minimum wage, which I saved for last in providing some of that backdrop, because it is one of the most hotly debated components of the economic relief debate right now. It's been 12 years since Congress increased the federal minimum wage. 2009 was the last time, so it's been stuck at $7.25 an hour since then. Meanwhile, the tipped minimum wage has been stuck at $2.13 an hour for 30 years, Pete, since 1991. And there's also an archaic loophole left in federal law that allows disabled workers, and hundreds of thousands of disabled workers at that, to be paid sub-minimum wages as well. And sometimes that's like pennies an hour for their work. So this is the backdrop against which Democrats in the House and Senate, and through this economic relief push, are really trying to say it is way, way, way long past time that we got our act together, Congress, and raised the frickin' minimum wage. They're trying to do it to $15 an hour by 2025, which is sort of like a gradual increase over the course of the next few years. And that push would also sunset the sub-minimum wages for tipped workers and disabled workers that I mentioned, so that all workers are paid a living wage. And that would set sort of a floor that then states and localities can keep going beyond, and some, will, and go higher than 15. Now, the reason that this is one of the most hotly debated pieces right now is because the Senate Democrats, who are trying their damnedest to try to get economic relief to the families who have been needing it since, months ago, right? We're kind of legislating at this point to catch up with like 6 months ago problems. That's how I feel. They are desperately trying to get this relief to families without any Republican votes in the Senate. And so what that means is that they're using a process called budget reconciliation. And that's an arcane sounding but really important process that allows some things to get done with only 50 votes in the Senate. And of course, Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris, being the tie-breaking vote. And there right now is a real debate going on that includes, this gets really nerdy, the Senate parliamentarian around whether budget reconciliation can be used to raise the minimum wage. Now, I would say, if someone wanted to ask me, it's absolutely wild that this is even a debate, given that the test is, does the policy in question have a meaningful impact on the federal budget? Yeah, I would say that raising a whole bunch of people's wages is gonna really change a lot of things in terms of the federal budget, but somehow this is an open question. And of course, Republicans would like to see this kept kept out. So we will see where things go. There's folks like Senator Bernie Sanders who are really going to make this the hill they're going to die on, because they realize this is the chance for Congress to raise workers' wages, and it's time to govern like Democrats won, rather than shrinking from things that can't get bipartisan support if they are the things that workers are asking for and need.
So well said is my favorite thing to say when you're done with a sentence, but it gets repetitive. But I would just add one final caveat to what you just said, which is this is the hill that Bernie Sanders is going to die on. I feel generally that this is the hill that all Democrats and progressives need to die on for the next 18 months. Basically, I am of the school of thought that you have to do everything you possibly can get done right now, from, something as radical as expanding the court to D.C. statehood to the minimum wage. And I just wanted to get your final, question, your take on that idea. Just to go big, go fast right now.
Absolutely. You said it. And it's absolutely the phrase.
It's the way to win elections, too, because you're going to give people stuff.
It's both the right thing to do. It's also the politically smart thing to do. Going big is really the only option that Democrats, I think, should be considering right now. It is what we're seeing from a lot of them. And we are seeing a lot of pushback to the kind of, bullshit austerity hand-wringing coming from the Republicans, who seem to have developed selective amnesia about their role in jacking up the deficit that they now remember that they hate, because it's not about tax cuts for rich people that we're talking about. And so I think, there is an element of it feels like Dems get that now is the moment to go big in some ways. But at the same time, right, we also have to remember that we have a really complicated Democratic caucus in the Senate. It includes Joe Manchin from West Virginia, who was, a really, really significant get in bringing him over to say, yes, we're going to use reconciliation for this relief package. But he himself came out and said, but I'm not so sure on whether the minimum wage should be done through this. So we need to move past any of that kind of, we're worried we're going too big. And everything you said, Pete, is right. The concern we should have right now is doing too little. And when you think politically, and I always start with the policy and what people actually need in their lives is kind of where I start, but you can't ignore the politics to the extent that Democrats are also thinking 2 years down the road, and 2 years is not that far from now when you think about the period of time that they have to get some things done before they're all of a sudden in the midterms. You need to not just be thinking about what is it that is most going to help people. They also need to be thinking about which kinds of relief are people going to see and be aware of and realize got delivered to them, because that is the kind of policy and political intersection that really kind of is at play in elections. Yes. People are going, what have you done for me lately? What were you able to deliver? You made all these great promises, but we learned this, in the Great Recession. If it's the submerged state, if it's we helped a bunch of people, but they didn't know, right? Then we're in get your government hands off my Medicare land, right? And that's not going to help people understand what Democrats have delivered for them. But if it's checks, if it's unemployment insurance benefits, if it's, the kinds of stuff that we're talking about, raising healthcare, the minimum wage, the child tax credit, all these things that actually show up in dollars and cents terms in raising people's incomes, helping them be able to afford the basics and support their families, then that does start to feel like the promises that Biden campaigned on and that so many of the other presidential candidates in the primary leading up to the general campaigned on, as the progressive, the Democratic agenda, what can be delivered for people when Democrats are in office. And that is also definitely part of what people are thinking and seems to be, I think, helping to dictate some of the smart choices that are being made about making sure we don't make the mistakes from the Great Recession and do everything kind of, under the surface. It needs to be the right stuff, but in a way that people also can see.
such a great point because so many of the players right now, decision makers, policy makers in and outside of Washington, D.C. lived through the Great Recession and saw, the results of what happens when you don't go big. And so for the next 2 years or less than that, really, Democrats have the best opportunity they've had maybe ever to reverse or to change this long-held belief that government is not the solution, but the problem. They can be the solution right now, from the vaccine to saving people's businesses and giving people more opportunity in every possible way, many of which we discussed today. So I think they have to go big. Based on
Pete, we would be remiss if, I know you're going to say that we're finishing up, and I always love going along with you because it means we're going down some rabbit hole that's worth going down. But we got to say, right, as we talk about what it would take to go big, this is why we have seen so much attention and so much debate and discussion within the Democratic caucus around the filibuster, because it's great that we've got this tool called budget reconciliation that we were just talking about that can allow you to do some things with just 50 votes. But there is a lot you can't get done with budget reconciliation, like DC statehood, like passing the Voting Rights Act, like democracy reform, all of these things that we know need to happen, and many of which, frankly, are kind of precursors to being able to legislate in a way that is actually what the American people want versus tyranny by the majority, courtesy of Mitch McConnell. And so I would say if we're having this conversation about going big, we've also got to name check the filibuster and filibuster reform at a minimum, if not nuking it outright. That really does need to be still in the conversation if Democrats are going to be talking about truly going big rather than just getting what they can through reconciliation.
Well, I look forward to keep talking with you throughout it all to try to understand it and put it in both policy, politics, and moral terms, as always. The great Rebecca Vallas, I'm so glad that you were able to go long. You're the one with all the important meetings and things to do and stuff and people to save. Well,
I always love getting to be late to stuff, Pete, because, no, just kidding. I actually hate being late, but I'm really well known for being a very late person. So anyone who knows me knows I'm generally 12 minutes late to something. And in this case, it was well worth it because I always love talking with you.
Rebecca Vallas, thank you very much.
Be well, Pete. Talk soon.
Okay, what did I tell you? Isn't she great? Rebecca Vallas, so great to talk with her. I am now and always have been extremely interested in the root causes and solutions to poverty. I've learned so much from her and from many of you because of what you've shared with me about your own personal experiences living in poverty, as well as so many books and guests that have joined me over the years. But she has been my kind of mentor and introduced me to so many great policy experts, many of which we just talked about there. And hopefully I'll get some of them on. So enlightening, so important to kind of hear how these people are chosen and what their job is and the difference between one administration and the next, of course. That is it for today's podcast 290, making some subtle changes this week and all the time here, new announcements as we build and build here to the podcast and our community. I hope to see you on the Discord platform anytime, 24/7. That's a platform you can text, voice, and even set up video chatting. I'm going to start using it to record parts of the show to get your input on. I think I'm going to give it a shot. We'll see how it works, see if it makes the actual podcast. If you're not a member of our community, we would love to have you sign up. Just go to patreon.com/PeteDominic or go to the paid subscription link in the show notes. And don't forget to give 5 stars and a review on Apple Podcasts. It's really the best thing that you can do, I guess. Okay, time for me to wrap this baby up and zip it up and zip it out and get it to you. Thank you very much for listening today. Tell your friends I love you. You're not alone. Bye-bye. Take it away, John Carroll.
Stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. And even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense and you stand black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up, stand up, got to stand up. Ooh, come on, just stand up. Everybody got to stand up in the darkest hour. Stand up, people got the power. Stand up. Come on, 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 stand up.
Because you listened all the way to the end, you're going to be the only one who knows that this weekend I tried to clear the bathtub drain using several different chemicals and a snake that I got at the hardware store. And then I ended up trying to get the flange drain off with a drill. And I drilled through the bottom of the pipe and into it, and made a small job a huge job. It's not the first time I've done that in my house. It's really frustrating, and I feel like a real failure. I called my friend who helps me with such things. I have several friends like that, which is great. And he told me to stop what I'm doing and call a plumber. So we called Julio. Julio can do anything, and he's a great guy. He's from Ecuador. I love him. Known him for over 10 years. And he always comes and puts his cape on and saves us. And he came over, and Val said, come inside. I was out here in the shed because Julio is here. And I said, hi, Julio. And we greeted each other because we're pretty good friends. And then I said, well, he was in the bathroom. And I said, well, what did Val tell you was the issue? And Julio looked at me and he said, she said that you broke it. She said you fucked it all up. That's what Val told Julio was the problem. So anyway, he's come back tomorrow to fix the drain. Thanks for listening, everybody. That felt good to get it off my chest. Have you ever done that? If you have something worse, please email it to me to make me feel better. Standupwithpete@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.